Here we are. We made it. Quinn, thank you for making the time to chat with me, man.
Of course.
Yeah, Quinn, you and I are friends from many, many moons ago, and still to this day. And I specifically asked you to jump on the Zoom with me to help me out, as I begged and pleaded for your expertise and advice, like most times. And we've been busy and whatnot because you've just started a new job. Can you remind me about that?
Yeah, so I am a skills trainer for a milieu setting inpatient or not in, excuse me, outpatient clinical setting. It's structured like a school, but it's got kids ranging from all kinds of issues to like your basic non-cooperative personality issues to like bipolar disorder to suicidality to, you name it. There's a kid in the school that's probably dealing with it. Autism also, although it's kind of a tough environment for autistic kids to be in with all the other kids around. But
got it.
So I coach these kids in their specific skills and kind of direct them and help manage the classrooms.
And opposed to working at a Chipotle or a McDonald's, this new job sort of plays into what your desired career track, right? I'm thinking yes. It does. And
yes.
For the millions of people that are going to be watching this on YouTube, what can you kind of give us a little bit of a general hey, here's kind of the career and what I want to be getting into?
Yeah, so I would like to be a mental health counselor. I've been rolling around the idea of going for a doctorate lately more than I was in the past. So that might be in the cards, but at the moment, the goal is to get a master's in counseling and dealing primarily with like depression, anxiety, and maybe substance abuse with cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy.
Got it. And until then, you're just gonna have to suck it up and deal with me, because as soon as as soon as you get that job, you'll be just like, you're like, sayonara, everybody from the past. I'm on to bigger and better. But yeah, well, cool. I think we've had all kinds of thought-provoking conversations in the past, and I wanted to sort of put it out in front of you. We've already spoken a little bit about this, endeavor, this journey that I want to go on with LiveAloha365. And I haven't quite, one of the things I'm hoping you can help me with is I haven't found a great way to just like pitch it to someone. Not that it needs to be pitched, but I'm just, it just sounds it sounds so exhausting to be like, oh, like I'm going to be a content creator. Like, I don't want to say that, but
sure. Well, then don't.
Yeah. And hey, thank you for giving me permission to do that. Yeah. Because it's, I think
that's too broad a term. Dial it in.
Not to answer my own question. I feel like maybe this is how therapy works. Is like you go and then you just start talking, then you start answering your own questions. Anyway, I don't want to post content for content's sake.
Mm-hmm.
I guess. I think that's why I don't want to say like, I'm a content creator.
Sure.
In my mind, it has like an attachment to like.
Well, you know what comes to mind. Sorry to interrupt you. But so people call themselves influencers, right?
Sure.
Maybe what you're looking for is an inspirer.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I also, part of this whole thing, right, is, I mean, Aloha, I had another Zoom with another friend of mine, Kamaka Diaz, and, he talked, he and I were talking about aloha, and he was like, it's just love, right? Like you just, you want to live your life in a way that's just full of love, right? And,
Sure.
my flavor on it growing up and being born and raised in Hawaii is like aloha, right? And I think when I talk about aloha, I guess I have this belief that aloha is inside of everyone. Like love is
Hmm.
inside of everyone. And I'm
Hmm.
sure I could be proven wrong and there's no, like, these people or these examples of terrible people in the world, but I guess I'm I
Yeah.
guess I'm I guess I see that the world will never hit like a quota or a cap of aloha it can take,
Hmm.
and I just am like, why not just continue to pour that into the world? Maybe it's a funny TikTok dance, or maybe it's a thought-provoking conversation like this we can put on YouTube or whatever. But it's I kind of want to, evoke the aloha out of people, I guess, Brene Brown, who I'm sure you're familiar with. I keep my goal, Quinn, just so you know, is every one of these Zooms, I want to mention Joe Rogan somehow. I want to mention Brene Brown somehow. And I want to make the guests laugh. If I could do those things, I'm sure great episode, great, YouTube video.
Yeah.
But Brene Brown's quote that I've stolen, um, something along the lines of like, live that kind of love so you can give that kind of love. And
Hmm.
so in my, of course, stealing and repurposing, right? Live that aloha so you can give that aloha, right? So it's like,
Hmm.
man, maybe I can just give people a snapshot into what I'm doing, or post content, or be an influencer, an inspiration, or whatever, however you put it. I don't know, to fulfill that, I guess.
Sure. Well,
And
can I say something about why I'm excited about your project?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so obviously, as I've mentioned to you before, I've struggled with my own mental health issues, depression primarily, and uh, living at what we called the ski lodge
Ski
with
lodge.
you and the others completely changed my life. And waking up every morning and being greeted by you and your positivity and your sort of esteem, and like, we have extremely different personality types, and in a lot of cases that causes friction, but with you and I, it meshed, and you seemed to quickly appreciate me for what skills or strengths that I do have, and I think you're an awesome person to be undertaking this project.
Awesome. Well, that's very kind of you to say. I am wanting to do a better job too of not like deflecting. So I feel like not many moons ago I'd be like, "Oh, shut up, Quinn. I don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah, it's
whatever,
hard to take
dude."
compliments. It's
It's
hard.
it's weird. And now I've moved to a place of just say like, "Okay, cool, thanks, move on." So I'm not trying to seem disingenuous, but I appreciate you saying that. It feels like fuel. It's like, okay, cool. Like someone said something positive. I want to makes me want to keep going.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
that's the feeling that you caused for me back in the day.
awesome, sweet. So you know, live aloha to give aloha. Is
Mhm.
that does that is that just something I could just say to people like who? So like, why are you? And maybe you know I'm kind of drawing in the lines, but maybe I just need to draw wherever I want. And do I even need to tell people why I'm doing this? Like in my mind, I'm like, well, I can't do anything until I make an about video, like explaining to everyone what this is and why it's happening. But it's like
I,
maybe I don't know.
I think that really depends on how clear you are on the vision and how you want to implement it. It sounded to me like you were really feeling it out still, like how you want it to be done and what terms it's really going to be in and whatnot. And I think when that's the case, you should just kind of roll with whatever feels right and then let it form itself as it goes. You don't need to structure it super strictly right now. There's nothing out there like telling you have to have it completely organized at this point. And in some ways, like there's going to be a lot of learning that takes place, and like how is this message best delivered, or these skills best built for different kinds of people, or like how, like different ways that you can communicate a concept, and that's going to evolve and look different. So like starting broad and starting freeform is totally fine.
I think maybe that's what I have to accept is like right now, maybe it is free form. I feel like it's a good way to say it. Like, not that we're grabbing the spaghetti and throwing it on the wall, see if it sticks, kind of thing, but I'm not, I guess I'm not saying like live aloha to give aloha, but only live aloha like this. Like
Mhm.
I have to do it like that. It's just like, what, I'm just gonna do that. And maybe there's some kind of, pillars or, values or, whatever, I don't know, some kind of creed to come up with that's like, okay, like, by definition, living aloha means this or something, which you and I have talked about sort of, I don't want to misquote you, but like, kind of like your life's purpose or meaning of life. And you've spent a lot of time like chewing on that and like, evolving it and making sure that it's right for you. And maybe that's kind of something that I need to do too, of like the all referring rule, like, okay, we're going to post this video and then we refer back to that rule before we do it. It's like, yeah, it fits the criteria, so to speak. I don't know.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's like it's a diamond in the rough, and you're gonna have to kind of pick and polish and chip and whatever, and the form is going to be revealed as you go, I bet.
Sure.
To a large degree.
Sure. The thing that's like on my mind is like, I don't know if you want to share, like, you don't have to share specifically like your life's motto, but do you want to talk maybe through like, I don't know, just the process or the journey up to that point you got there? I think it's super interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll try. I'll try to make it somewhat.
Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I'll try to make it like linear and coherent if I can.
Sure. And not to throw it back, deflect the compliment back to you, but that, I think the reason it's like seared in my mind is like, it was a very profound and like influential moment or influential milestone in my life when you were like, "Brad, like, okay, here," like, having a conversation over some beers and dinner and just kind of you laying it out for me. It's just like, wow, like it felt like I kind of like evolved a little bit, like in my mind, like, whoa, like that's a new concept, that's a new clear concept in my mind that's really sticking out. I love hearing you talk about it. So
yeah, I'll try. It's, it kind of settled in place for me a few years ago, like around the time we were talking about it. And I like, because it's still a thing I think about a lot, but I remember I gave it to you, like I boiled it down to a sentence at one point, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what that is. Do you know if I hit the home button, if it'll leave this? Because I think I have it in my notes.
Well, I was going to say, I'm sure I have it in my notes as well. Let me see if I, okay, I have it. I have it. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, let's hear it and maybe talk about it.
And hey, maybe we could update it perhaps or something.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
This, ladies and gentlemen, this next quote is by a man named Quin Wogmon. The continuous, constructive, and effective adaptation to one's environment, with the goal of that adaptation being the continuous facilitation of the phenomena of life.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And that doesn't have necessarily anything to do with morality or how one should behave socially, or it doesn't necessarily inform one's day to day. It was meant to be sort of as broad as possible, but to give someone who, like, particularly someone who's not religious and kind of searching for that kind of like sense of meaning and being involved in something that's worth doing, like a sense that they're involved in the process of life and can contribute to it in a positive way, and that inherently has a good value to it when one sort of evaluates their participation in existence. Because for me, for a long time, I like wrestled with the idea of death a lot. Like I sometimes use the term obsessed, but like I really want to stress that it wasn't like in a morbid way. It was just the idea that I would cease to exist, and then like what that means about the value of what I do and how I behave, right? Because if I cease to exist, like that's, one can easily stray into a nihilistic point of view when they have that philosophical realization, and it isn't sort of held at bay by what I think for most people is like a faith-based belief system. And that could be religion, it could be a lot of different things. And if it's not sort of held at bay with a faith-based belief system, one can easily fall into kind of like a hopelessness in the sense that like what you do doesn't matter. Because if you're gone, and then like you're not going to remember anything, it's not going to be like the fruits of your labor are not going to be yours to enjoy. So like, again, just easy to fall into hopelessness there. But I think for anyone who ends up in a spot like that, what's really important is to tap into what you enjoy in the here and now. It's really easy to get lost in like the mistakes of your past, or like things that you fear about the future. And I think that one of the most meaningful ways or impactful ways of kind of fighting hopelessness or making progress toward living life in like a loving or beautiful way, which, you know, is subjective to an individual, it's just tapping into what you enjoy in the present. And that can be like reading a book, or like maybe if you like rain, like the fact that rain is happening, that's always been kind of like a soothing thing for me that I tap into when like I'm feeling shitty, like basic sensory stuff, even just like, do you enjoy feeling things? That is a good in and of itself. And
well, something that I so many awesome points. Thank you for going there. One of the things that you had said that, I don't know, not triggered. It wasn't. Oh well, there's all kind of triggering stuff probably for people of, you know, varying wherever they're at on their journeys. But you had you had talked about calling yourself into the present moment and just being like acknowledging, you know, things that you're enjoying in the present moment. And I think that's something like one of the reasons for like, you know, I guess there's a frame of thought of like, Kyle, like, right, you're all for show, like, can you just live aloha without like posting about it, you know? And I guess like in some regards, like this social media endeavor, this, you know, content endeavor has a lot to do with me like living it, like sticking with it, you know, like not to, I go back and forth on the word accountable, but like it's sort of like, bro, like how many times have I just said I was gonna do something, I just you know, bitched out, I just didn't do it, you know?
And that's I'd like to make another point just before I lose it. That like the sentence that you read earlier about sort of defining good, defining the good in existence, that like the point of doing that for myself, like I by no means am I like throwing that out there as something that other people should take up. If they choose to and they like it, wonderful. If not, that was a totally personal thing that I needed. And it's because like in the small decisions in the day to day, right, those, like you make a ton of little decisions about yourself and about how you interact with others. And if you're valuing life and experience, then that's still like there are cascading effects of how it informs the decisions that you make. Like for example, like I've had tendencies to be antisocial. Like I eventually sort of defined that as being sort of like that was like fear-based behavior and behavior that didn't steer into my belief of good. Right, you like once you've sort of defined that for yourself, you can sort of evaluate your decisions and tool them to steer into what you believe is good. And that has like, you do it on like little things like, oh, I'm feeling bad, do I sit here and listen to sad music and have a beer, or do I like take a walk in the rain because that kind of calms me down and ties me into the present, right? Do I read a book that that contributes to positive thoughts, or do I you know, do something negative that sort of confirms how I feel, confirms the negativity that I'm in, confirms how sad I am or whatever, and just sort of compounds my position in that hole, right? Like, make minor decisions that steer into your belief of good, and that like has a exponential effect as you sort of build your skills in evaluating and recognizing when you make decisions like that, and your sort of efficiency toward what you believe is good, if that makes sense.
There's it does make sense, and it makes me think, makes me springboard to, I think, you know, there is times where I'm like, oh, like Live Aloha, and it's a little showy, and I don't mean it to come off like that, and I think there's like a, oh, like Kayao, like everything's great, and like, you know, like, oh, Live Aloha, woohoo, like it's like a fantasy, it's like a fantasy land, and what you said there I think is important. It's like, there's got to be some kind of actionable steps that I can be like, and I do think I've done, I've built that skill over time of like living aloha, and like, you know, one example of that could be like by just like reframing a situation.
Yes.
You know, like some people are like, oh, you're just like so fake positive or whatever, and it's like, no, like I've literally like spent time like over and over like training myself to be like, car breaks down, you know, or whatever, like you get a flat tire, right? And like, oh, I'm so pissed, like so and so should have changed my tire when I told them to, or oh, that who left a glass bottle on the road, who popped my tire, right? Like how you're saying, like digging yourself further into that hole, or like affirming the like negativity. Like you could easily instead, you know, I'm gonna find this author because I brought it up in the last Zoom that I did, but there's a space, you know, between what happens to you and how you react to it, and in that space, right, there's like a lot of powerful thoughts and decisions can be made, and so like, boom, you pop your tire or whatever. Okay, before I react, right, you can choose to reframe into a place of like, well, shit, I've never put on a spare tire before, but now I'm going to learn how to do that.
Yep.
You know, it's like, you know, whoop, you know, and like, and oh, well, next time, you know,
it goes from rage at someone you've never met about something that's outside of your control into something that's totally inside your control and is now a learning opportunity. That's a massive shift in how that affects your mood, your psyche, how you move forward about the day. Like that's one minor decision, one minor reaction that has a major effect.
I don't know that I've met a lot of, I mean, I guess I have. I was going to say this phrase. I don't know that I've met a lot of people who really value that. I think people do value it.
I think people don't understand it.
I don't think I've met a lot of people who constantly work on it. You know, and I don't want to say like, oh, for those of you who are viewing, nobody works on it as much as I work on it. Obviously, I'm like super good. It's not what I'm trying to say. I just like, you know, the people who do work on that skill, I can tell, you know, and I can see how valuable that is for them. So anyway, that's what I was trying to say is like, from what you, I springboard there of like this whole Live Aloha journey. I'm not trying to, I don't want it to be a fakey, you know, like I don't want it to be fakey. I want it to be valuable. I want it to be a place where someone can be scrolling through, we've all been there, scrolling through our Instagram feed hours on end, you know, and I want it to be something where it's like, dang, like, yeah, like that was impactful, you know, like that little sound clip was impactful that I heard from Quin and Kyle, right? Like, shit, you're right. Like, I am just moping around or whatever. Like, you know.
And I just like to stress one more thing. I don't mean to like hijack where you wanted this to go. But I feel it is important to say that like it's not to say that one should not feel their negative emotions, or in fact what I would say is embrace them, don't push them away, feel it, process it, and allow yourself to sort of not sit in them, but embrace that emotion.
Embrace the suck. Yes.
Embrace it, process it, accept it, find a productive way to move on. And that's like, I think it's a phrase used by the Marines: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Like that applies to that skill. Embrace, accept, find a productive means of moving on. Like it's really hard to begin with, but the more you do it, and like particularly when you take your time to kind of like really process to begin with, especially if you're someone that has a hard time with being like emotionally reactive, like slow, smooth, smooth, fast. It gets easier over time, and eventually it becomes more of a reflex than a conscious thing. Like it's very much not easy for me. I'm a very critical person. There's a perfectionist inside me, and like when stuff goes wrong or errors are made, particularly by myself, it's very hard for me to let that go. And it's like developing those skills has been super useful for me.
Go back to what you just said. You said, develop these skills to get to a point where it's a reaction. Would you say a reaction or a reflex?
A reflex rather than a conscious thought. Yeah.
That is,
because it becomes a habit.
That very much articulates how I've been feeling about, I don't know, how I've lived my life up to this point, which is not unique for me. We all do that. We all get to a place where the way we decide to live our lives becomes a reflex, right? Or what did you say again? Did you say reflex?
Yeah, a reflex or a habit rather than a conscious thought.
When you say it like that, right? The conscious thought is like, oh, how is this? How am I interpreting this, right? But we get to a place where it's just boom, like we just fall back into that neural pathway. We just fire it, boom,
and Then the analogy that I use is that like your cognitive habits and your neural kind of framework are kind of like a dirt road, right? The road that you originally like, so dirt roads develop ruts the more they're driven on, right? And so your ruts will have, or your roads will have inherent ruts from your genetics, right? And sort of the way that your parents are. And then beyond those inherent ruts, you will make choices that will either create new ruts and dig them deeper, or dig deeper the ones that were already there. And so the road, like the cognitive, anyway, I'm sort of botching the analogy. I've said it smoother in the past, but the point being, more you travel the road, the deeper the ruts get, the more likely you are to fall into that same road the next time you pass a similar way. And so like developing these newer, more positive habits, it's not going to be like a flip of the switch, like, oh, I learned this new thing and I understand this concept and therefore I'll apply it. I mean, in the sense that you are then able to apply it, sure, but the process to it becoming a habit is a means of developing ruts that are probably deeper than the ones that you had before, or at least as equally deep. So then it's kind of like you sort of have the crossroads presented to you and you choose one if they're equally deep. But it's about developing that habit to the point that it overcomes the negative one you already have. And that is a lot of work, but it's worth it.
I'm trying to find a way to tie these two things that I have in my mind together. When you say it's a lot of work, what does the work look like? I guess is the thought I have, and I'm saying that out loud because, one of the things that I wanted to bring up to you was like, I'm not trying to start like a self-help guide. Like step number 1, wake up in the morning and say you love yourself, or like, I'm not. Man, that might be
awesome.
Yeah, that's good. That might be something I do, just because I said it here. But I guess just in your current background and where you want to take your career life, are there actionable steps that you're like, man, like I've really seen these things pay off for people to like live a more positive life or anything like that? I don't know if those two things connect, or if you
yeah, it looks different for everybody. I think a really important thing to understand is that like it in my opinion, it requires like a willingness to be honest with yourself and to evaluate yourself, and be willing to be kind of individual and unique, and like sort of how you define the way you want to move forward, like, and because it might look like that or it might not. It's about finding sort of where, like, if you find yourself mired in negativity, it's about finding kind of where, I don't even want to say where the source of it is, because I think people get bogged down in trying to figure out like what was the cause of their trauma, or why am I negative like this, when like dwelling in the past like that really isn't helpful, and in some sense is a waste of time. Once you, like, if you understand your negative cognitive habit, then a lot of times that's enough to understand sort of what you might need to correct or introduce to sort of put yourself on a different path. And I think a lot of the time what it's really about is finding what incentivizes you or motivates you to move forward. And that sounds simple and obvious, but it's not simple, it's tough. And like a big part of that for me was like that sentence that we came up with earlier, like, because that for me, part of my issue was like existential dread and not knowing what the point was, right? That was my particular personal hole to fill, and that'll look different for someone else. So figure out kind of where that hole is and find your means of kind of shoring it up. For someone, maybe it's like they don't like their body, or they had something happen when they were younger that like traumatized them and jaded their view of the world. Like I'm not making a direct point as much as I wish I could, because I guess I'm trying to stress just how individualistic, like it's going to be a unique experience for everyone. It's not going to be like, you can procedurize certain general parts of it, I suppose, but striving for actions that move you closer to self-actualizing, I think is one of the I guess less bad ways of making it succinct.
Sure. You going back to something you had brought up way earlier, there was this appreciation on both parties, between you and I, right? Like, man, appreciate each other. Is there, one of the things I appreciate you is just how well spoken you are, and how you think so much differently, or at least you express that you think so much differently than most people that I've met, period. Do you contribute that to, I don't know, a certain, what are the ingredients that have gotten you to this version of Quin, I guess? Anything super impactful? I'm sure many super impactful things.
Yeah, there are. Well, I think it might be helpful to me if you would maybe, this is going to sound like I'm fishing for compliments, I guess, but it truly would be more helpful if you maybe described a couple specific things that I might be able to like explain.
I think something that you've already showed in this conversation, as an example, is you process through so many layers quickly, efficiently, and eloquently, right? And so there's a lot of things, like the question I just asked, hey, are there any actionable steps that that you'd suggest? Basically, most people, wake up early, eat carnivore diet, like they quickly get to a place of where they're just like, yes, layer one, I can answer that question. But like we just saw you go through not just that first layer, but we got down into layers 2, 3, and 4. And I know I'm not explaining the layers I'm just using it as an analogy very well.
Sure.
But then we come back to the top, right? Like, and you're just like, well, it's just very unique for everyone, you know.
And that, yeah, and I'm so on that specific point, I'm just so hesitant. I like to know people before I suggest things usually.
Which would make sense.
Because I like to get a handle on their experience and what they particularly deal with and whatever, because it's of course a unique cocktail in every case. And so that's anyway, that's my hesitance with like just throwing stuff out. But where that comes from, well, I mean, my parents are both people who really value being patient and analytical about things. Like, and that it kind of also comes back to like that slow, smooth, fast thing. Like, I used to really struggle with sort of things like that. Like I like when I was little, I was an idealist. I think that actually I've never, this has never occurred to me before, but I think this is part of it, that I really looked at things in black and white when I was young. On anything, I was super opinionated, thought about things in terms of black and white, and that just doesn't work in the real world. It's not accurate. So I was an idealist. I thought of things a lot in terms of black and white. My parents were logical people, analytical thinkers, and they fortunately, for me, like really took the time to sort of try to build those skills in all their children. And I think that the combination of those two traits, I just recognized over time, I really valued accuracy of like ideas or concepts or whatever, like truth, right? And I, viewing things in black and white, of course, never really fit, like the puzzle pieces never really fit thinking about things in that way. And I think like the desire for truth and like the skills in analytical thinking just really wore away at the black and white ideas or like the extremes that I would think in, and moved me more toward kind of the more true gray middle ground on different things. And just eroding, like I'd get stuck on one idea and just chew on it for like a long time until I sort of like, until the puzzle piece started to fit my experience better. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then that would be like okay with me, and I'd kind of figure that out and feel better about it, and then I'd move on to sort of the next idea that to chew on until it fit. And that was really ugly and unpleasant emotionally to begin with. I was frustrated and angry a lot. And yeah, but I think just the desire to understand the world and that just the weird idealism and thinking things are like, thinking anything is general or absolute, and just how irrational that really is, and breaking that down over time and seeking philosophers or thinkers that sort of break the mold of certain norms or ways of thinking, to sort of help me better be able to reshape my ideas to again fit the puzzle of my experience better.
No.
Does that answer that question?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I'm glad there was a little bonus discovery there too, as you're answering the question. That's super cool. I am wondering if you can help, poke holes in my current thinking of just this whole endeavor that I'm trying to go on. I don't know, like why would it why would doing this on social media, we'll just say, be better than just like doing it not to post it and just making the world a better place like that. Because if there was two of us and I just was posting things on social media and someone else wasn't, I mean, in theory we're both like contributing to our direct community and our maybe online community, or well, in a positive way, I guess, right? I guess, like, I don't know, do I why would it be good for me to do this at all? Like, why don't I just like be a good person?
Are you wanting me to answer that, or are you asking that of yourself?
I would like you to answer it.
Both.
Both of these things. Yeah. Like, why? Yeah. Why even do this? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer would be that you can reach a lot more people than just someone working in their direct community. I think, especially according to sort of like, I've been on kind of like a Buddhist philosophy kick. And according to like a lot of different things, like those little choices you make through the day with the people that are directly in your life, like some believe that that's what you should really focus on and master the positivity and health of. But I don't think that is in any way exclusive. I would tend to agree with that, particularly for those who are focusing on their own mental health. But that's not exclusive from doing something to impact people positively on social media. Like, we see a lot of ill effects of it, right? But like, what other platform could you use to try to spread positivity to a greater degree? There's nothing. There's no way to reach more people in a more efficient way. So that would be the obvious answer and advantage to it.
I think, and that's also my answer. Yeah, that's yeah. I think, I do think there maybe is this. I had talked about this in a previous Zoom. There's this weird. I don't know if it's an obsession, but it's just like, I'm meant for something more. Like, why is my existence not mean more? Because it's like, okay, if I live aloha with one person in my life right now, but I could live aloha with 100,000 humans, like, that would be better, right? I mean, like, I guess like that would be a bigger impact. That would mean more, right? I mean, who knows? I don't know, right? I mean, I guess, does it even matter to ask that question? I guess is it good enough? It matters to me, so that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's all that fucking matters.
No,
like, if you believe in it and you feel like you're moving in the right direction, I think that's moving you toward actualization, and therefore it's a good thing. And I don't think you should really worry about much else other than streamlining that idea. There are always going to be people that disagree. I don't like using the term haters, but they will exist too. Because using the term haters just is kind of a way of disqualifying everyone that disagrees with you, and that's not healthy either. Listening to criticism is, of course, essential and healthy, even if it's uncomfortable. But
that's a clip right there. I'm gonna clip that. Put that. People could be people be real quiet after they hear that, Quin. They're gonna be real quiet. They're not gonna have nothing. They won't have much to say after they hear that. I mean, I cannot believe I'm spacing his name. Holy smokes! In Avengers, the big guy, purple guy, Thanos, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a struggle. Thanos, he's like, yeah, like, I just know that this is what I'm meant to do. Like I'm gonna rid the world of half the people. We're gonna be better for it. I'm not gonna let anything stop me in my path.
Yeah, they did
I
a really bad job of fleshing out why he believed that. That I read a couple articles on it. It was a lot more complicated because his idea, he had a definition of good that he was working toward. That it kind of similar to like wildfire is good for a forest because it clears stuff out and makes way for new and fresh life, and even preserves the health of it by protecting the bigger trees that exist. Like his thought was removing half the population for a similar reason.
but it was just
anyway,
like
I'm not.
but it was just like he's bad because he wants to kill that many people, right? Yeah. There was not as much depth or like,
It could have been made a more interesting and ethically complicated narrative.
Yeah, which I think some people maybe got there. Where like people were like, "Oh, I'm kind of like low key rooting for Thanos." Like, it kind of like I mean, I know I got to that point. I was like, I mean, like it's not like a terrible idea. Let's like, yeah. But I bring up Thanos because I'm not like, when you're like, yeah, you should just not, you should streamline this process. Just live aloha and give aloha as much as you can. I don't want to like ignore the haters, so to speak, like Thanos. Just like I'm not letting anything stop me.
Right, exactly. It's a great example because that's what happens when you block out all the haters. Is you become insane and can't listen to anybody telling you that you're wrong, which of course results in you ending up being wrong. Because you're not being challenged or critiqued in any way.
Yes.
So the haters are important to keeping you honest at least, but to define your success by people disagreeing with you is ridiculous. Or lack of success by people disagreeing with you is ridiculous.
Is that just a fancy way to say haters are my motivators? Is that what you're saying? I think that's what you're saying.
I think that ties in.
Quin, I want to make this world a better place. I want people to live life on purpose. And I guess in my jaded view of things, I guess I just have this obsession with like, why don't we just love more and like be happy more, right? But we've talked about so many dynamic things in this conversation, right? Like, it's constructive and okay and very real that there's going to be things that you feel that are bad, and and dealing with that is healthy, right? Like, it's I guess I have a problem sometimes of like on the surface, right? This whole thing just is like, woohoo, like life is butterflies and rainbows, right? And I think maybe something as the journey continues, and like we said, right, it's free form, you can help guide me of like, hey, like you could consider posting something like this, right? Or like,
I have a suggestion right now, actually.
Sweet.
Not for a post, but for fleshing out that perception that it's all about butterflies and rainbows, right? I mean, without the days where you step in dog shit, the butterflies and rainbows don't seem so wonderful.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
The happiness and positivity don't mean anything if there isn't suffering to contrast with it. If it was butterflies and rainbows all the time, that would just become your norm and you wouldn't know any different. They wouldn't be pleasant things. There'd be things you'd take for granted.
There'd be some sort of new contrasting.
Yeah.
Bad.
Your worst day would be the day you like saw a blue butterfly instead of a green one or some shit, rather than like, someone calls you a name or you get hurt or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like positivity is and happiness and pleasant things derive their value quite fundamentally in the contrast to negativity. These things exist in a relationship and in a balance. It's not about living life without having bad shit happen. It's about handling it well and directing your energy and your responses to productive things, even when the situation makes it challenging to do so.
Yeah. Yes. Because I don't I don't want to paint this picture of like, hey, like, insert bad thing happened to you. That's okay. Like live aloha. Like that's not totally what you're saying, right?
Well, that's avoiding, not embracing, right? Embrace,
Yes.
accept, move on productively. Like
Embrace, accept, move on with aloha. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why don't we all just do this already? Like, why? Yeah. Why am I?
Well, because it's simple to say, but it's really hard.
Simple to say, hard to make it become a habit of yours, right? Yeah.
Especially, and this occurred to me the other day. Again, sorry to hijack.
No,
but it's particularly hard to be positive, I think, because I think we may be, I have nothing to back this up. This is just a personal theory. I think we're wired to dwell on like negatives and mistakes because we're conditioned to do that because of survival. Basically, it's an evolutionary thing that like a good thing happens. Okay, that's awesome. We enjoy it. But the good thing that isn't threatening and is therefore less important. A mistake is potentially threatening. Something that negative happens needs to be corrected, right? Like, so I think most of us probably have a natural tendency to focus more on the negative because of how important that used to be for survival. And so it's important to understand then, if it's true, if my theory is correct, it's then very important to understand that you have a natural propensity to dwell on negative or focus on it more than you do on the positive. And so understanding that you sort of have to fight your instincts consciously in this way to build a better habit or refocus your efforts.
I always find myself in trying to process the things that you tell me. This is like most conversations. This is the point. This is the point in the conversation where I'd grab my beer in whatever restaurant we'd be in, right, and just start drinking it, like, yes, yes. What you're witnessing is current impact of your words and thoughts on me. So much appreciative for that point of view. As you can tell, I'm still like processing it in my mind. Like, yeah, these are good things. and like it'll be like 2 days from now where I text you my actual response. I'm like, okay, hold on. Now I've fully digested all of that.
Sure.
In your I guess I just say your professional opinion,
such as it
is there anything that you're like, oh, like here's some suggestions on like, from what I've heard of what you're trying to do, consider these perspectives, or maybe take this course of action when you're talking about these kind of things? I don't know, anything that from what I've currently explained, you're kind of like, oh, that makes me think of this, and this is probably valuable for you to hear.
As someone who really valued truth and correctness growing up, and didn't kind of obviously those things are important, but not when you're like sacrificing emotional well-being. And I think like I used to really sort of view people who were like really positive as though they must be insincere. There's no way that someone exists in this world and is that positive all the time. It has to be disingenuous. And what I would now say, if I could have a conversation with that version of myself now, I would explain to him that there is such a thing as useful delusion and healthy delusion. Which when I use the word delusion, I don't mean it to be disparaging, but I read about a statistic where so those who had the most accurate worldview, the most correct sort of understanding of the world and sort of like their chances for happiness or success or to have certain like goals or whatever met. The people who understood their chances of that kind of thing the best were those who were slightly depressed and therefore obviously unhappy. Those who were the most like, and they were also less successful. Those who were the most successful and like achieved their goals better and but of course had a slightly less correct worldview, an approximation of their chances for success and meeting goals and whatever, were those who were you know, on like like 20, well, slightly positive, like delusional in the positive sense, right? So it is okay and even beneficial to just believe that good things are going to happen. And I know that sounds silly. It sounded silly to me when I when I first like heard about it or saw it and tried to read it and parse it for myself. But and another thing that I would sort of say to back that up is like there's a power to belief. There's a documented power to belief, and that like you can see that from all the studies in which people are given medication to help them, like for example antidepressants. People given an antidepressant and a sugar pill, right, and told that it's going to help them feel better. Plenty of people who get that sugar pill with none of the serotonin or whatever, like they feel better too. People with medical issues, they get the sugar pill. They believe they're going to get better. They start thinking more positive. Maybe they even start taking some actions that they'd felt too discouraged to take before, right? They start to see improvement, right? There's huge power to how you structure your perspective, and erring on the side of sort of optimism and positivity yields pretty significant advantages. Even if you, I mean, and that can be a struggle to begin with. Maybe you don't really believe whatever, right? But you sort of try to make decisions that are optimistic, like shoot your shot. It's a cliche. It's talked about too fucking much and like becomes silly, but it's a real thing. Shoot your shot, see what happens. You make a mistake, it's a learning opportunity. Embrace, accept, find a productive way of moving forward. Like I think building that skill and working on sort of believing in positivity, like, and I know that's hard, especially for those of us who have like hard lives and are disadvantaged in certain ways or disabled or whatever. Like, I mean, and I know that that seems insurmountable to have a positive or optimistic perspective, but it's even more important in those cases. Sort of the more challenging it is, the more important it is in a lot of cases, I think. Yeah, I guess that would be my 2 cents.
Quinn, speaking of cliches, say less. I was already in and doing this whole journey, and like most times, you not only affirm what I'm thinking, but you strengthen it in ways that I wasn't. My current skill set wasn't gonna allow me to make my point of view as dynamic as it is after talking to you. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And I'm trying to find a good way to wind this down. But like most times where you and I get together, I don't want it to wind down. I'm just like, let's just keep going. Let's
just keep talking. Yeah.
I just had a thought. When when we're having these kind of conversations, is it at all, there's when there's a little tennis going on between the people who are conversing, I don't feel so drained after, right? I feel more like motivated and like, yes, like, not that it was a workout, but I feel like, yes, but when I'm trying to live aloha or be positive or be who I am with other people, and it doesn't feel like there's a tennis match going on. It just feels very like I'm doing one thing and they're doing another thing.
Sure.
I do feel drained. Do you? I guess I'm ever cognizant of like oh, I hope Quinn doesn't feel crappy or drained after these
No,
conversations, you know, like
no,
you're
no.
it feels like you pour in a lot of knowledge to me and I don't pour a lot of knowledge back. I
no,
just absorb, I sponge it.
it doesn't feel like that, and in fact I have a point to make sort of about similar things, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
I, as someone who now works in mental health and has had my own mental health issues and family members that did, and et cetera, and the stuff I've learned about and gone to school for, blah blah blah. It is extremely hard, if not impossible, to help someone who does not have some kind of intrinsic desire to move forward, or maybe intrinsic isn't quite the right word, but an internal desire to move forward. If someone doesn't want to fix things, isn't motivated, like, by no means to discount them, but there's not a lot that you can do for them. It's kind of like, the addict has to hit rock bottom and have that, like, for lack of a better phrase, like come to Jesus moment before people can really help them. Like, even like, really, really good programs, if that person doesn't really want to improve, doesn't really want to put that work in, just like anything else, they're going to backslide, they're going to fail. And, to carry the analogy of the addict farther, like, they're pretty much guaranteed to make a mistake, right? Like, I don't know what the statistic is, but most addicts relapse, right? That's the same as any human in any endeavor. They're guaranteed to make a mistake. Like, it's gonna happen. It's just how you deal with it. It's if you frame it as a learning opportunity, or if you take it as like a categorical failure and discourage yourself. Like, anyway, I'm digressing now, but the point is that like and with the kids that I work with at the school, it is way easier to help. Like, you see it with the kids who haven't hit that point where they want to move forward. Impossible to help a lot of the time. Really hard. You really feel drained after that because you've put in a lot of effort and you just kind of, it's not being reciprocated, and you can feel that what you didn't have an effect. And it's like in the job that I'm doing, it's pretty important to like remind yourself that that's not really about you and how good you are at your job. It's because that person isn't in the place to receive that help yet. And to tie it into what you were saying, no, I never feel that way with you, because I always know that you're engaged and thinking, and you make really valuable points, and you cause me to like, I always like talking to you because I always have those unique thoughts that I hadn't thought about before. Like I had earlier, like, you contribute way more than you give yourself credit for.
Awesome. Well, I hope to make that a habit and continue to live my life that way. There was a teacher who, he went through all kind of things in his life, but anytime someone would be like, "Hey, professor, like how you doing?" And he'd always say like, "Better than I deserve." And I don't know, just kind of that humble mentality of like, you know what, like, sure. I'm just gonna keep, I want to just keep putting more in than I'm getting, and I think if I do that, then things will work out.
There is a fine line between humble and unreasonably self-deprecating.
Sure. Yeah, you got to be willing to, kind of work in the quiet. Like,
sure.
Humble's like, hey, I know my worth, and I know that what I'm doing is making a positive impact. Versus like, what there's probably a lot of examples that could be very self-deprecating. But I don't have anything else right now to talk to you about. I don't know if you do this, but there's times where I'll listen to a podcast episode and then I'll just like find myself referring to it and going back to it. I can already tell. I don't know who likes to listen to their voice after they record something. But I can already tell I'm gonna listen to this back over a couple times, and I hope people got something out of this, and I hope you want to
Sure.
do it again, and I hope
Yeah.
if we if things happen in life and we're like, hey, we should probably talk about this on the Zoom, right? It would benefit you and I, but then it potentially benefit many more people in the world, like we talked about.
Sure.
Sweet. Yeah. That sounds awesome to me. Anything? I don't know if you have anything else on your end, but I do not.
No. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Quin, until the next time we do this, much love and aloha. Thank you so much, my friend. And I'm excited to schedule the next one whenever it may be in the future.
All right. I'll look for the text.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Quin.
Right.
Aloha.
Of course.
Hilo's such a rainy old town. I listen to the rain come down. Don't it fall so free?